Salah Negm, Director of News, thank you so much for joining us. Can we start off by just getting a brief history of who this ISIL group are?
ISIL group, it was formed originally in Iraq as the Islamic Emirate of Iraq, led by Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi, who was killed I think a few years ago. And then it was followed or succeeded by several people who took his place as the emirs of this emirate Islamic Emirate in Iraq. Then when the war in Syria started, they transferred their activity in Syria to fight against the Syrian government as part of the opposition. Then they split from the opposition and split from Al-Qaeda, and now they are claiming their own state and caliphate, or the Muslim ruler, in both Syria and Iraq together.
So what prompted Al Jazeera's decision to change the name this week?
First, the group changed the name, and we didn't change the name. Actually, we started by calling it ISIL, the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant, which was their original name, and that describes their scope of activity geographically where it is. Then they changed their name to Islamic State only, and people got confused. Shall we call them Islamic State or Islamic State in Iraq and Levant? In other television stations, they call them ISIS, which is Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. But we think here Levant is more accurate because it represents a geographical area that contains several countries, not only Syria. So we went back to our original name, which is ISIL, Islamic State in Iraq and Levant, and that's for two reasons. First, if you call them Islamic State only, that has a problem both linguistically and culturally. Linguistically, because it's just like an absolute term that any Islamic State will be this. And culturally, because you are branding a complete religion by activities of one group. So we thought Islamic State in Iraq and Levant will determine their geographic location, and they're not just synonymous to any Islamic State anywhere.
But don't you think by changing the name and going back and forth that you kind of give the group a bit too much credibility?
No, changing the name doesn't give credibility. Actually, what gives credibility is sticking to what they call themselves as PR or branding. Because there could be a group that calls itself, for example, the Army of Christianity. And if we call it only this without qualifying it as a group or thinking about their name to call, that will brand the whole Christianity. Or a group that extremist one that calls itself the Jewish state, for example. So is it Israel or is it that group somewhere else? We have to put things in context and explain it to the viewer in order to be accurate and give the background to them.
Do you think the changes confuse the viewer a bit?
I don't think so, because there was a confusion in all media at a period of time when they changed their name. But if you see the speeches and messages now coming from all the coalition forces or countries who are participating in that, they call it ISIL because that's the more accurate thing. And we started by calling it. We went back to our original choice. So
what are the discussions like amongst people in the newsroom when, you know, some people agree, some people disagree? Who has a say in what goes on the air?
It goes on several levels. If it is a simple thing, then it's a decision between the executive producers, heads of output, and director of news. If it is something complex like this, we involve the whole newsroom in it. So an email was sent asking them their opinion. It's a discussion in the editorial meetings, but at the end there is a decision that should be taken, and that does happen with the executive editors.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the clarification. Salah, thank you for joining us.